You ever come across a tool that you knew should exist but didn't realize it did until you started looking for it? Well, that's what we're going to take a look at today. So let's dig into it. So this is a tool that I have no experience with, but I do have a lot of experience with its better known cousin.
Did you say my name?
Not today, bud.
We all know who their favorite is.
Well, I'm not sure, judging from the comments, I would agree with them, but either way, let's take a look at this interesting joinery method. So let's talk about my progression with joinery over the years. The first joinery method that I really liked to use was the pocket hole method, and this is something that I still use today. After that, I wanted a little bit more pizzazz in my woodworking, so I started to use dowels. And then finally, I made the big leap all the way up to a Festool Domino. Now, making the progression from a pocket hole jig to a doweling jig is pretty easy. In fact, these days, it's even easier than ever. Now, when I purchased my first pocket hole jig, I went with the old standard, the Kreg pocket hole jig, and this cost me about $80 to $100 back in the day. Now these jigs are going for about $150. And I'm not sure what's happened in the last few years, but there's been an explosion in the market of competitors for this tool. And there's a lot of great brands out there like Masca and Going Make that are making the same tool with the same functionality, and it's even made out of metal. But I was a little hesitant to try out those brands as you don't see a whole lot of YouTubers using these brands. But after using both my Kreg and my Going Make, I can honestly say that Going Make is my preferred brand. But as I said earlier, my needs progressed, and I wanted to use a joinery method that was just a little bit more durable. So my next purchase was a self-centering doweling jig made by Eagle America. I think they're American made. Now this jig doesn't even appear to be available anymore, but I paid about $150 for that jig, which was a heck of a lot of money to spend on a jig, especially when I was just starting out. But the good news is, just like with the pocket hole jigs, there's a lot of alternatives out there. And in fact, these jigs nowadays appear to be costing less than a pocket hole jigs, many of them for less than $50. And just like I do with all my videos, I'll leave a link for a comparable doweling jig to this Eagle American in the links below. But I do recommend getting one with a larger capacity so that you don't run into issues down the road. This one has a capacity of just about 6 inches wide. So the young woodworking Brian now has his pocket hole jig as well as his self-centering doweling jig. So what's next? Well, if you're like me and you watch any popular woodworking channel, you'll assume that the natural power tool progression for joinery is to go from the dowel all the way up to the Festool Domino Joiner. But this upgrade's a little bit harder to swallow, even when I purchased mine, which was about $1,000. Now these things are going for about $1,200. But I did it anyway, or as Whiskey Butterfly likes to say, I did it anyways. So with this high dollar tool, I guess I can build furniture now, but it got me thinking. Is there a tool in between the doweling jig and the domino joiner that most woodworkers are overlooking? Well, this gave me the perfect opportunity to do one of my favorite pastimes, an Amazon deep, and I think I found something. Now you may be saying, ha, I know what it is, it's the biscuit joiner, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Now the biscuit joiner is a great tool, but in my opinion, it's more of an alignment tool, as the biscuits don't provide a whole lot of support and they can even be broken with your fingers.
He is so strong.
So if you do a lot of panel glue ups, a biscuit joiner can be a great option. And if you're in the market for one, I highly recommend this Wen one. They're practically giving it away at under $70. But for this video, we're looking for the strength of a domino or a dowel for our joinery. So let me show you what I found. Bert.
I knew you'd come crawling back, cuz. I got you. Here you go.
So this is the AONLLEN Dual Spindle Dowel Jointer. Let's check it out. Before we dig into this box, I first want to say there's not a whole lot of competitors in this space. I think there's one made by Triton, Grizzly, and this one made by AONLLEN. AONLLEN is the most expensive one you can get on Amazon. So let's check it out and see what comes with it. So here you can see the tool comes with a nice carrying case along with the tool itself with pre-installed 8mm bits. It also comes with a secondary set of bits at 6mm. It also comes with 8mm dowels as well as 6mm dowels. It comes with a hex key, owner's instructions, as well as a couple of fuses. Now this jointer comes with the 8 and 6mm bits, but that's not the only size dowel that this jointer can accommodate. The jointer can accommodate 6 to 12mm bits as well as 1/4 to 7/16 freedom units if you're nasty. And we're nasty over here, so let's take a tour of the unit and see some of its features. If we look at the top of the unit, you'll notice there's a nice handle to give you support as you're plunging your dowel holes. Inside that handle, you'll find onboard storage for a hex key that's used to switch out the bits. On the left-hand side of the tool, you'll find the power button, which is used to easily turn the tool on and off. Now, a couple of impressions after turning the tool on, especially from someone who's dealt with the Festool Domino Joiner for a few years now. It does appear to be a little bit louder than the Festool, however, it runs a lot smoother. There's less vibration in the tool than you get with the Festool Domino Joiner. If we continue on the left-hand side of the tool, you'll notice at the very base of the tool there's a depth stop, and this goes from 0 to 40 millimeters. This allows you to set the depth of your dowel hole. So one thing to know when setting that depth stop is you want to set it to half of the length of the dowel you're going to use. So if I'm using a 1-inch dowel, which is about 25 millimeters, I'd set the depth to 12.5. So I'd loosen the knob on top and set it to 12.5. Then when we look at the top of the joiner, we should see that the bits only extend out 1/2 the length of that dowel. So if I plunge the jointer, you can see those bits only extend halfway. Next, let's take a look above that stop block to see how we can adjust this jointer for angles. The top of the jointer can be supported by pulling the plate down, and it can go anywhere from 0 to 90 degrees, with positive stops at 22.5, 45, as well as 67.5. And once you have your angle in place, you lock it down by twisting the knob on top. With your angle picked out and locked into place, now let's take a look at how we adjust the depth of where you want to place your dowels. And that's done on the right-hand side of the tool with a rack and pinion system. Now this may be a little bit difficult to see on camera, but there's a little pointer that shows you the height of your top plate. Once you have your desired height, you lock it into place by twisting the knob on the side. And that covers just about all of the alignment features with this tool. Now let's take a look at a couple of miscellaneous items. If we look at the bottom of the tool, you'll notice a dust collection chute, and unfortunately, I'm going to need an adapter to connect my Festool hose. On the very face of the tool, you'll notice 2 spring-loaded non-slip pads. These will give you support as you're doing your plunges. Lastly, you'll notice teeth on both plates of the tool that allow you to attach jigs for repetitive work. And the bottom plate even has indentions that allow you to attach screws. Now let's take a look at the bits and how we switch them out on the tool. Here's a look at the bits. As you can see, they're fairly small and they're brad point bits. At the very base, they have one flat edge. And it's that flat edge that allows you to secure that bit into the tool. To exchange the bits, we'll first make sure the tool's unplugged, and then we'll take the hex key that's stored in the handle. Then we'll look down the throat of the tool and rotate the current bits until that hex bolt is exposed. Then it's just a matter of taking our hex key and loosening each one of those bolts. Once that bolt is loosened up, that bit will easily slide out. Then we can take our new bit with the flat side of the base facing that hex bolt. We'll slide that bit in, tighten the bolt, and we're good to go. Then it's just a matter of repeating the process for the other bit. So let's test this jointer out on 2 joints to give you an idea of how this thing works. First off, let's do a standard corner joint with the dowels fashioned in this manner. Now the nice thing about this being a dual spindle jointer is we don't have to make a line for each dowel that we're going to be placing into this wood. Instead, I can make one line right in the center where the joint will meet. With that line marked out, I now need to adjust the depth of the joiner for the dowels that we're going to be using. And here I'll be using 8mm dowels that have a length of about 40 millimeters. And I've already got my 8mm bit installed into the jointer, so let's adjust the depth to 20 millimeters, which is half of the 40mm length. And I know this will be hard to see, but I'll adjust the depth to just a little bit over 20 millimeters. Next, I'll plunge the jointer just to confirm that our bits are going at least halfway through the length of the dowel. Next, I want to account for the thickness of the 2x4s that we're going to be drilling our holes into, and a 2x4 is about 38 millimeters thick. So I'll adjust the height of the top plate to about 19 millimeters and lock it down. Lastly, I'll adjust the angle to 90 degrees so that we can begin our drilling. With everything set, it's now time to begin drilling our holes. The first thing that you want to do is to make sure that your workpiece is firmly attached to your workspace. Then we'll place the jointer on top and align the center line with the line we struck earlier. Then we can turn the tool on and make the plunge. And just like that, we have 2 very clean dowel holes. Now let's repeat that exact same process on the other piece of wood. First, we'll secure our workpiece, line up our markings, and then make the plunge. With all 4 dowel holes cut out with only 2 plunges, we can now join our 2 pieces of wood together. And here you can see how beautifully those two pieces come together. Now you may have noticed that we only aligned the center line on our jointer to the markings that we made, and you may be asking, what are the other two lines for? Well, if we place the piece that we just cut out, you can see those aligned to where those dowel holes will be. But let's try one more simple joint to continue to learn this tool. So instead of having this joint in a horizontal position, let's try it in a more vertical position. So the first thing that I want to do is to strike a line in the center of the bottom board. Once I have that line, I want to take my square and butt up my second piece of wood right up against that square. And I want to make sure the placement of my second piece of wood is exactly where I want it. With our second piece of wood in place, I'll trace out the back edge of that board. With those hash marks made, I can now carry that center line to the second board. Then I can extend our line just to make it a little bit easier to read. And that's all of the markings that we need to do. The vertical piece in this joint will be handled in the same way we made the other joint. First, we'll secure the piece, line up our markings, and then make the plunge. And with that, we're halfway done. Now let's begin to work on the second piece. To do the second piece, we're going to have to change the angle of our jointer to 0 degrees. Next, we'll take our line that we struck against the vertical piece of the joint and we'll align our jointer to it. Now this is fairly difficult to show here, but I'm basically taking the center line on the plate of the jointer and aligning it to the center line on the board. I'm also aligning the top of the plate to the other hash mark that we struck across that line. With all of those alignments made, I can now plunge the jointer into the wood. And this would have been a heck of a lot easier if I used larger scraps of wood, but we'll get it done. And with the 4 dowel holes made, it's just a matter of putting it all together. And once again, for 2x4s, everything comes together very smoothly. Well, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I think this is a tool that absolutely gets overlooked in the woodworking community. Take it from somebody who's had a domino joiner for years. This tool can do the exact same thing as the domino joiner, and it's a fraction of the price. So if you're on the fence about a domino joiner specifically because of its price, this may be the perfect next step for you if you're wanting to expand your joinery techniques. As I see very little material difference between setup and operation between these two tools. Well, I really appreciate you joining me today, and if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment. It really does help out this woodworking channel. Also, check out my website, www.flynndogwoodwork.com. Until next time, take care as always.